Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 348 of my modded Factorio playthrough. In this episode, we're going to review what it takes to farm biters, and also do the module research we'll need for tier 8 modules. Enjoy! Well, we're down to 1.9 cells on average per reactor, so I kind of want to go down there and look, because we're right on the cusp here of running plutonium. Because let's check our control reactor, and it has actually a lot of cells still. Okay, well that makes sense then. It's just these couple of reactors that probably got placed before the rest of them, so now most of these are empty. So yeah, it was just that one, because now the average number of cells is 1, but clearly some of them have them and other ones just don't because they were exact. So now the temperature is going to start going down and we're going to start running on plutonium. And it looks like we are burning orbs now, because we just have so many of them. They're all trying to park right there. Well, it is to be expected. But yeah, our burner setup is basically at full blast right now. Well, while we're waiting on this, we can do some more research. The last major hurdle before we start making our gold science and rocket parts are tier 8 modules. And to do that, we need to grow some biters. Unlocks the biter refugium, another pollution-consuming device, which is always nice. Basically anything that grows stuff, like the aquariums, the puffer nests, and the biter refugiums can reduce pollution, and quite a bit, minus 25 a minute. So let's follow the chain here. That first we need to run a small biter egg experiment, which we put in blazing puffer egg, crystal dust, and crystal seed. That's stuff we have to make a small biter egg. And then we can grow that biter egg into usually a small biter, but sometimes a small biter queen. It needs alien processed meat, which is alien goo added to normal meat, and that can come from any biological creature that we chop up. Probably the best thing right now is puffers, since we need the puffers for their eggshells, not for the puffers themselves, for the most part. And if we chop up a small biter or a small biter queen, besides that raw meat, we also get a raw crystal splinter, and that is the tier 1 crystal splinter, so the small one. Something we probably don't want to do, but hey, it's there. So if we run our egg experiments long enough, eventually we're going to get some queens. And then we feed those queens some meat, and we lose about 0.5% of the queens, but they will give us about 1.5 eggs. And then we won't need to do the egg experiment anymore. We can just keep growing small biters with the queens here. And we can take those small biters and make the raw crystal splinters by doing the biter zoo. But since we're actually creating splinters in a different way, we'll probably just chop them up into meat instead to feed back into the process. So we'll research that, and we continue to the medium biter egg experiment, which now requires the raw crystal splinters. It can come from the small biters or from fish, however you want to do it. Crystal seed, crystal enhancer to make a medium biter egg, and then we hatch those eggs. So the small one only gives us a 5% chance for a queen, but the medium only gives us 2.5% chance for a medium biter queen, and requires more raw meat, which we can get from wherever. We do that a while. Eventually we're going to have enough biter queens that they can just make the eggs instead, and then we have the option for the zoo to get the raw crystal shard, which is the second tier of crystals, and we can chop up the meat of anything we don't need. So we'll do that. And then finally, the third tier here, we'll do the biter egg experiment again, now with those raw crystal shards and the corrosive puffer eggs, and then we'll hatch them. We'll only get a tiny % chance of getting a big biter queen. We get enough of those, and then we can start laying eggs. And then finally, we have the zoo for the big biters, which gives us the raw crystal, which is the tier 3 of crystal that we need. And anything extra, we can turn into meat. So that's the process. It's all very interconnected. And then from there, the process is similar to the other crystals, where first we have to cut it down into the 3 colors and powder, and then we'll use crystal slurry and a grindstone like we did with the previous tier to polish them, The harmonic crystal is a combination of the previous three. And then we have milling to crush them down into powder if we have too many of one type compared to the others. And then the modules themselves. It'll be a module processor board, which is similar to our blue circuits. Copper, gold, fiberglass, and ferric chloride. And then we need the processor boards for each of the 5 module types, which are essentially identical. They take computer parts, but the main difference is which crystal goes into them. And pollution cleaning and producing gets the harmonic crystal, where speed, efficiency, and productivity get the one color. And then from there, we just need to research all of these modules. And it'll probably take a little while, especially because the numbers get so huge. But the way that it works is you just take that speed processor board, a bunch of them, with the previous speed module, and some components and a gemstone, and you make module 6. And it works the same way, except these numbers get very large, especially because each tier requires more and more processor boards. So we probably want this biter setup to be pretty huge, just because the number of boards is going to be crazy. Like tier 3 only required 3 boards. So each new tier, besides requiring the previous tier, also requires that many more boards. So these final tiers are going to take a huge amount of resources, so we don't want to go small. But just this alone is going to take forever. But we could potentially upgrade that if we need to. We have a specific lab setup designed to handle that right here. And they actually don't even have upgraded efficiency modules. So we'll hit that, and we'll probably just need a ton of those. I'm not sure where they would go because there's only so much space here. But if we need to make more, we'll make more. Wow. Down to 0.8 fuel cells on average. So most of these are empty now and are just reducing in temperature. I wonder if we need another fluid train, because I think we only have one. And it's kind of just chilling out right here, but yeah, it's gone right now. But I think it's mostly keeping up. As these things start running out of power, their duty cycle is going to change, and they're going to be on basically all of the time and completely drain their power. 3.4 gigawatts right now. Is that a new record again? It feels like it should be. And that solid fuel setup is still going strong, but it looks like it's mostly biter orbs now, so I suppose that makes sense. And it's perfectly clean energy. Okay, some of these setups now are getting red lights, which means they are too cool for maximum performance. So once we get to this point, they're gonna kind of just stay on all the time and very quickly equalize and drain. So I think one more pulse, and that's gonna be that. We need to check to make sure that the factory's accumulators don't go to 0 first, because when it gets to 15 is when plutonium's going to turn on, but it's not really going to produce a lot of power. It's going to take a little while, so we want to make sure that it can catch up to the power demand before the accumulators are completely drained. This is the first time I think it's been tested in full. So yeah, you see it turns on now, and it's just sad, with the exception of the ones that actually still have some fuel. They're trying, but they're basically drained now. Now it's just these two are hopelessly trying. And this one too, I suppose, but it's just about out. Well, at least they're all going to be synchronized. And let's see, we've got our modules now. Let's just hit speed 8. But is research actually happening? I think the bar is moving, but it says 0 up here. But are they being consumed? Yeah, they are. I wonder if that's just a display bug. Let's make sure power works correctly, and then we could diagnose to make sure we're not just wasting resources to the ether. Oh, I think I see it. There's one 4K pixel of green bar right here. I think we're going to need faster research here. Let's see, no gold, but I'm wondering if that's just an output thing. No, it's gold plate. And that actually makes sense. We're probably going to have to deal with that error for a while until all of these get empty. And the last reactor is shutting down. Is it going to tell us what the resource consumption is right now for all of these? It does, and it looks like those numbers are absolutely tiny. To be honest, we probably don't need to have the productivity modules in there. Or at least we can just throw some speeds and maybe some efficiencies and see what happens, because it's not that difficult to make these resources. They're very low-level resources. For the first time in a long time, our accumulators are below 30. We're still actually producing a huge amount of power from that burner. But it's actually just now cooling down because we went through everything that we had. And it's also nighttime. So we're producing absolutely nothing right now. So this is probably the worst case scenario. Which is good. It's scary, but it's good to make sure that plutonium can fire up in time. Because the factory is producing almost nothing. So there we go. All of these turned on, and they're slowly heating up. And of course the smoke is blocking things, but they're not at maximum temperature yet, but it looks like it's fine because it's holding just fine. It's just a lot of power. And when you look at it, it only takes a few seconds for like at least half power to be attained. And then like 80% power comes a couple seconds after that. 100% takes a long time to get to, but it actually warms up pretty quickly here. Yep, and there's our MOX fuel cell to show that this is running. It does not have a latch, it's always connected, so even though it's at 30, it's just going to keep increasing the accumulators of the factory until it runs out of fuel at its 7.5 gigawatts. So let's see if our 1 terajoule was enough for this. Well, it's daytime now, so the solar panels are helping again. It seems like, yeah, we have just the right amount of accumulators. Because now we're above the point where their solid burners would turn off. And eventually we get through the fuel cells, so now they're done. And these are all going to slowly cool down, so hopefully we don't maximize the accumulators. They're not all synchronized, so this number isn't quite the same, but we're at about 80% right now. And yeah, it got to like 82% or so. And now everything's going to cool. And then when it gets to 15, it gets another swing, and then the process repeats. So that's why these plutonium reactors wait until the last second before they turn on, because they have so much energy in them that we have to. And then those used cells are being reprocessed. No curium, but it's running great. So one other thing we need to check is just to make these labs faster. Since the items that they're researching are not difficult to make. They're just using module cases, which is like aluminum and plastic. Main boards, which is copper, tin, and phenolic boards. Module contacts, copper and silver. Like, none of this stuff is very hard to make. So we don't really need productivities there. That's just slowing everything down. Well, let's put a speed and then 2 efficiencies to cancel it out. And see what that gives us. Those are some fast robots. Now what do we get? Well, it could be about 3 times as fast. Although the limiting factor might be these blue boards. And they are made from the tier 1 of crystals. And that's 15. But we probably could crank that up. But let's at least max this out. It's all old tier components, but whatever. Because I don't want to go nuts with the speed modules and just be inefficient for no reason. Okay, I'm back. I've been playing for a few hours. It kind of sucks to cut content out, but the factory is kind of getting so big to where I can't really show everything anymore. The episodes would just be too long and move too slow. So I try to keep it focused. And in the meantime, even though it's been a few hours of gameplay, we've made a reasonable amount of progress on these modules. So it's not going super slow. It's actually going a little faster than I thought it would. So we are making progress. By the time we're ready to breed biters, those will probably be ready. But one thing I worked on is a new orb delivery system that we were using an increasing amount of robots. That we almost have 20,000 construction robots now, just because of when we pick up orbs, we need so many of them. So I figured, it's like, can't we use drones to make this a little easier? So I have a lot of parking spots here and supply depots for each of these small orbs. So if there's any bigger orbs, the bots will just take that to where they go. But if there's smaller ones, they get put on drones, and they will be taken to where we're processing orbs on the science bus here. You can kind of see it in effect, where they will get distributed to each relevant chest. And like 21 drones right now are working on the small biter orbs. And the logic is still in place for them to turn into bigger orbs, and if we pick up bigger orbs, they're just dropped there. And then we have all of these storage areas for small alien artifacts, and we have 300,000 of them, and I have logic set to where if we have more than 300,000, turn them into the big orbs and put them in a supply depot. You lose half of the energy if you would burn them by turning it into a big orb compared to a small one. However, it's 50 times more dense, so it's much easier to move around the factory. So there's a couple different gathering spots. I showed you one on the east wall. There's one on the west wall here. There's one on the southwest wall. And also one on the south wall. So we've got 4 of these and a new drone path that come all the way down here. And then any extra orbs are now sent to the solids burners as large orbs. We did base it on small orbs, but it works the same either way. Let's do an example here, and I guess we'll just do the east wall. And I have noticed that sometimes the gun turrets do have to go, so they do occasionally get close enough to where the wall really needs to work for it. It's not just the plasma turrets. They do get close enough sometimes. See, there we go. But the plasma turrets are definitely doing the lion's share of the work. Man, those are some big armies. But all of the zone expanders got placed, so everything on the base got caught up, and you would expect it to be if I was idling for a few hours. I wasn't idling, I was doing something important, which we'll cover in a second. But let's do all of this, and that's going to require basically all of our robots here. But it really spits them out fast because so many of them are parked here. And this is just a much more efficient way of grabbing orbs. So then they just fly up here. They're already nearby. And they can just start collecting things. Because before, the robots would deliver the orbs wherever they would go, like up here or down here, and then they would have to fly all the way back. This just saves them so they can just stay in the general area. And man, it spits out the robots. We are still working on upgrading them. We've upgraded all of the logistics robots, but we're about halfway with the construction robots, so that is still continuing. But they come in here and they've got 3 separate requester chests, but of course they put them all in the one and put the orbs in the other ones. I have it set so the drone will come by for 100 orbs. Technically they can hold way more than that, but since we only have a couple of the smaller ones, I feel like that is sufficient. And then yeah, when they go to park, they need all of these. That is a flurry. Looks like they've mostly delivered now. And they park pretty quick. You see that it looked like there was a lot of them, but they actually get parked pretty quick. And that's way more efficient for robots when it comes to handling these orbs. Way better. Looks like some robots did come from other places, but you get the idea. That it looks like whenever we have a lot of pollution, like we do now, that orb collection is just going to be a way of life here. And I'm guessing the reason why there's so many orbs is due to Swarmageddon, where every time you kill a biter, it splits into smaller biters, and every time you do that, it drops an orb. So we're probably getting way more orbs than was intended. Looks like there is a tiny zone right there. Not that it really matters, but we can get rid of it. There we go. So that's that. And I've upgraded these a little bit to basically just try to get as much as we can out of it. And they get about 15 or so. We probably could crank it up even faster, but for our purposes this works, and doing module research is probably one of the bigger consumptions of these parts. So once we finish with this module research, we won't need to do this ever again. We'll still need those boards for modules, but we won't need to consume them so quickly. Down to 16K of tungsten, but because we've been working on burning plutonium, we actually have some curium now. 4 pieces. Can't do anything with it until thorium. But when we do have that thorium, we'll be able to progress. And it produces so little of it that it's not a concern. Like, we are not going to run out of space. And one important thing, if you've noticed, no signal on stone byproducts. And this is the important thing that I was spending time on. We are out of slag, and out of crushed stone, and out of mineralized water. And the reason for that is because it's all been going into making plastic. And it looks like we're just about to catch up here. But ultimately, that all went into plastic because we haven't really used plastic to this extent, but our research requires these module cases, which requires plastic. And I did put productivities in there with some pollution cleanings, but still, we haven't really needed this much plastic yet up until this point, but now we kind of do. And we've been making plastic essentially as a byproduct. And I don't think it's really going to work. Like, this is fine, but when we're launching rockets, it's going to suck up all of our plastic. So we need a lot more plastic, and we need plastic that is reliable. Our ore bus will function just fine with no stone, because we have all of these sorting methods that in the event that they can't make the catalyst, they'll just go to the next worst one, and then that will create slag, and then we'll be good to go again. But nonetheless, we will ultimately need stone to make plastic. And is that something we want to rely on? Probably not. So I'm thinking we need to dive into plastic. There's a few different ways of doing it. One is the green algae way, or basically from stone. And an advantage to this is it creates lots of residual gas which turn into fuel blocks. And we could do it from trees with the raw bioplastic. We can do it from just plants in general. But these tend to have the disadvantage of being huge and relatively complicated, but ultimately huge, that it's much denser to make something using the limited resource way, like from propene, than it is the infinite way. So, the thing I've been working on this whole time is this. This is a setup to make plastic from oil. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing, because that would take forever. It'd probably be better to explain it as we're building it. Then it'll make a little more sense than all of this. But the main thing is you want to make sure there's no red numbers, and there aren't, so everything is balanced. And when I design a setup like this, I try to make it as self-sufficient as possible so it can be copied easily. If it wasn't self-sufficient, then if we made a second one or a third one or a fourth one, we could run out of the other resources that go into the build. And then we'd have to upgrade those builds. And then we find out we have to upgrade other builds. Instead, if you make everything as self-contained as possible, then all you have to do is basically copy the thing and only have to add in the known limited resources, and then we're good to go. So I decided on 60 plastic bars, and let's take a look at the numbers to make sure they make sense. There are some catalysts going into this, so it requires a small amount of these ores. It will require a modest amount of coal. And of course, water can come from anywhere. A whole bunch of steam for the crackers, but that's easy. And this is a small number. This is essentially 0. It's just kind of a rounding error, so don't include that. And it will require some hydrogen, which our factory usually just burns away. So that's it. This is an oil setup that essentially basically just needs hydrogen and a little bit of coal. Everything else is quite small. Then the output is our plastic, and then this is a rounding error, so don't worry about that. Some butane, but butane isn't particularly useful, so it's probably just going to be burned. Because what you do with butane is crack it into benzene, and then from there, we can turn it into toluene. But that essentially just goes into explosives, and that's it. So we have so much explosives right now, and also explosives are easy to make, so that's not very useful. Or we can turn it into ethylbenzene, which becomes styrene, which becomes rubber. And we don't need rubber in very large quantities, and we're making it just fine on our science bus, so we don't really need to do that either. And that's basically it. So it's just a fuel to burn. a tiny bit of acid gas, which already has somewhere to get processed, so we'll just put that on a drone. A tiny bit of sulfur, which we can put on a drone. And tiny bits of mineralized water and saline water, which can just be put into the pipes. So it's a very self-contained setup. And each one already has the proper amount of modules and high tier of machines. But before we get into this, we should probably make sure that we're actually building those machines. And we get very close to 100%. We're not wasting any heat energy, but we're basically using the full capacity of our accumulators with our plutonium setup, so it's kind of funny. So it's basically the bare minimum that it can be, even though we have a terajoule. It's kind of crazy. Looks like we've got everything on the bus, so we're good to go. And we need to build this somewhere. I guess just right here, since it's right next to the machines that we'll need. Less lag. As far as where to put it, I'm hoping it will fit in this spot right here. If not, we can put it anywhere. The two things it's going to need to be near is the hydrogen bus, just because that is way too much hydrogen for drones. And of course, naturally, it's going to need to be next to an oil patch. And we actually, as big as the factory is, don't have that many. Unfortunately, all of them are at the science bus here. There's one way out here in the middle of nowhere, but that's way too far. So I'm thinking we can use these, and we can totally use them if we just kind of move stuff around a bit. And then the pump jacks will have to pump 243 oil a second, which isn't that bad. So this could fit essentially anywhere. Maybe even potentially down here. That's just a long way for the pipe to go, so it kind of makes sense to be in here if at all possible. Or even next to coal. But let's see how squished we can make this, because the intent of this machine is not like our green algae setup. That was just kind of constantly expanded. That this is going to be a self-contained setup that if we need more, we'll just make a second one. You can see how we are out of plastic again. So actually our research rate is going to slow down now until we got this done. But that's going to have to wait until the next episode. Thanks for watching, and I will see you later.